Boyfriend took me to a Hooters dinner with his coworkers, then sat there while they grilled me about my career, hobbies, and future plans like it was an interview. Turns out it was, and I was just the latest in a long line of women they secretly rated in a group chat. I'm 26F and have been dating my boyfriend Alex, 28M, for about 7 months now. Things have been mostly great between us. He's a calm, collected guy with a bit of an old-school vibe, but he's always been respectful and thoughtful, until recently. I work in marketing, specifically social media branding, and I've always been very career-driven. Alex, on the other hand, works in IT for a mid-sized company. He's been there for years and has formed a tight-knit group of guy friends in his department, all around his age, late 20s to early 30s. From the way he described them, they were more like a little fraternity than co-workers. He's especially close with two of them, Tyler, 30M, and Ben, 29M, who he says are basically his brothers. Up until a few weeks ago, I hadn't met any of them. I had asked once or twice if I could tag along to happy hour or something casual, but Alex would always say something like, they're kind of intense when they first meet someone, or it's not really a +1 thing. I didn't push it. Then, one day, out of the blue, Alex told me he wanted to introduce me to the group. He seemed excited, almost nervous in a weird way, but I took it as a good sign. He said they were meeting for dinner and invited me to join. I agreed immediately, happy that I was finally going to be part of that side of his life. But then he told me the restaurant, Hooters. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He said it was a tradition, and that it's where they always met up. I felt a bit uneasy about it. Something about the vibe didn't sit right, but I didn't want to come off as uptight, so I said okay. The day of the dinner, I wore something simple but nice, black jeans and a white blouse. Alex picked me up, and the whole drive there he kept giving me little tips. Tyler's a big fan of hiking, so maybe mention that trail you did last month. Oh, and Ben's a huge foodie. Try to bring that up if they ask about favorite restaurants. It was kind of cute at first, like he just wanted us to hit it off. But by the time we pulled into the parking lot, I felt like I was being prepped for a job interview, not dinner. When we walked in, the guys were already there, seated at a big table in the back. There were 6 of them in total, all smiling in that overly polite way people do when they're sizing you up. As we sat down, Alex made introductions quickly, then the server came over, and the evening began. What I didn't know yet was that this wasn't going to be a normal dinner at all. It would be something much stranger, and honestly, pretty humiliating. At first, everything seemed normal, polite small talk, ordering drinks, the usual. But once the food arrived, the vibe shifted. It started with Ben, who leaned forward and asked, "So, what exactly do you do in marketing?" I smiled and gave my usual pitch about branding, analytics, and digital engagement, expecting a quick nod and maybe a follow-up about social media trends. Instead, Tyler jumped in right after with, "Do you see yourself doing that long-term? Like, is this a career, or just until something better comes along?" It caught me off guard. I answered honestly, saying I was passionate about the work and hoping to grow into a leadership position eventually. That seemed to set off a chain reaction. "What's your biggest professional accomplishment so far? Do you handle conflict well at work? What's your 5-year plan?" Each guy took turns asking questions like they were going down a checklist. I glanced at Alex a few times, hoping he'd laugh it off or steer the conversation elsewhere. But instead, he nodded encouragingly every time I answered, sometimes even stepping in to clarify for me. "She's really good at social engagement metrics," he said at one point like he was my manager. Another time, I tried to explain how I'd helped a client rebrand their image, only for Alex to interrupt. What she's trying to say is she led the whole campaign herself. It was bizarre. I felt like I wasn't allowed to speak for myself, and yet I was being quizzed relentlessly. The guys didn't seem mean, more like calculated. They were polite, even complimentary, but the way they spoke felt rehearsed, purposeful, like this was less about getting to know me and more about measuring me. I started to notice that Alex would look at them every time I answered, like he was waiting for some unspoken approval. Sometimes they'd exchange subtle nods. Other times, they'd raise an eyebrow or glance away. And it wasn't just work-related stuff. They started branching out. "What do you like to do for fun? Are you into sports at all? Do you cook? Do you want kids someday?" That last one made me freeze. It wasn't even phrased casually. It was direct and clinical, like checking a box. I laughed nervously and said something like, "That's a conversation for much later," trying to lighten the mood. One of the guys chuckled, but the rest just kind of looked at each other like I'd given the wrong answer. Meanwhile, Alex gave me a look that screamed say more. So I added, "Eventually, I think. But I want to make sure the timing's right, you know?" He nodded, satisfied. The others relaxed a bit, too. At that point, I realized what this really was. I wasn't meeting his friends. I was being evaluated, judged, like I was in some bizarre boyfriend boot camp, and they were the instructors. I sat there smiling, answering, laughing when appropriate, but inside I was boiling. I hadn't agreed to be put on trial. And the fact that Alex just sat there, letting it happen, even encouraging it, made me feel like I didn't really know him at all. As the night dragged on, I kept waiting for a shift, some sign that this was just a weird start and things would ease into a normal dinner. But it never came. Instead, the questions became more pointed. One of the guys, I think his name was Mason, asked, "Do you think you could handle being with someone who works long hours? Like, do you get needy if your boyfriend's not around a lot?" I blinked, trying to process the question. I like my alone time too," I replied, half laughing. "I wouldn't call myself needy." Tyler added, "Would you say you're more independent or relationship-oriented?" It was like they were trying to dissect my personality. I glanced around the table and saw all of them watching me with that same expectant expression, like they were waiting to score my answer. I didn't want to play along, but I also didn't want to cause a scene. Meanwhile, Alex was sitting beside me like a coach on the sidelines. Occasionally, he'd nod like I gave a correct answer, or offer little asides like, "She's super grounded, by the way," or "She's not the clingy type," which is great. It felt less like he was introducing me to his friends, and more like he was presenting me to some kind of selection committee. And every time I gave an answer that didn't land perfectly, I saw their facial expressions flicker with something. Doubt? Disapproval? I couldn't tell, but it made me shrink in my seat a little. Then Ben casually asked, "Do you think it's important for a woman to support her partner's goals, even if it means sacrificing a little of her own?" That one hit a nerve. I smiled tightly and said, "I think relationships should be about mutual support. It shouldn't be one person doing all the sacrificing." I thought that was a fair, balanced response. But there was a beat of awkward silence. Then someone said, "Right, but real life doesn't always work that way." Alex jumped in again, like he could feel the tension rising. "We've talked about that, and she gets it. She's not rigid about stuff, she's flexible." I bit the inside of my cheek. The server came by to ask about dessert, and I took the opportunity to excuse myself to the bathroom. Once I locked the door, I leaned against the sink and stared at myself in the mirror, trying to calm down. My heart was pounding, not from anxiety, but from sheer frustration. Why had no one warned me this was going to be some kind of vetting process? Why did Alex think this was okay? He hadn't told me they were going to grill me. He hadn't even prepared me for the tone of the evening. And worst of all, he wasn't defending me. He was actively managing me, like I was a product on display. I stayed in there for a few minutes, long enough to pull myself together. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to storm out. But I was officially done pretending I was enjoying myself. When I came back from the bathroom, I put on my best neutral face. I didn't want to make a scene in public, but inside, I was completely checked out. The guys were still chatting casually, like nothing strange had happened. I slid back into my seat and barely spoke for the rest of the meal. They didn't seem to notice, or maybe they did and just didn't care. Either way, I was grateful when the check finally came. Alex paid for both of us, and as we stood up to leave, the guys gave me polite smiles and handshakes. "Nice meeting you," one said. "Hope to see you again," another added. The words fell hollow. Once we got to the car, I expected Alex to bring it up. Maybe he'd say something like, "Sorry they were intense," or ask how I felt about the night. But he didn't. He just started the engine and said, "I think that went really well, don't you?" I turned to look at him, confused. "Are you serious?" He glanced at me, clearly caught off guard. "Yeah? They really liked you." I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because I was stunned. "Alex, that wasn't a dinner. That was an interview. They were interrogating me." He frowned. "It wasn't that bad. They just ask questions like that to get a feel for someone. It's their way of looking out for me." I stared at him. "Looking out for you? You make it sound like I was applying for a position in your life." He shrugged. "In a way, you kind of were." That stopped me cold. He went on, completely serious. If I'm bringing someone into my circle, they need to mesh with the people I trust. Tyler and Ben have seen me through everything. If they're not cool with someone, that's a red flag. I sat in silence, trying to process that. "So what?" I finally asked. "This was a test? You set me up to be evaluated, and just sat there while they picked me apart?" He didn't even flinch. "It's not about picking apart. It's about compatibility. You passed, by the way." I stared out the window. The silence in the car suddenly felt heavy. I had passed, like I was a project that met the requirements. He said it like it was a compliment, like I should be proud of myself. But all I felt was small. This wasn't just about some awkward dinner. It was about how Alex saw me, not as a partner, but as someone who needed to be approved, shaped, molded. And worse, he thought that was completely normal. We didn't say much else the rest of the way home. I thanked him for dinner when he dropped me off, just to be polite. But the second I got inside my apartment, I felt like crying, not from sadness, but from sheer disappointment. I thought I was building something real with this man, but now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I woke up still feeling unsettled. The dinner kept replaying in my head. The questions, the nods of approval, the way Alex treated me like a contestant instead of his girlfriend. I wasn't angry exactly, but something inside me had shifted. I decided I needed clarity. So I texted Alex and asked if we could talk. He agreed and came over later that evening. We sat on my couch, and I didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. "Can I be honest?" I said. "Last night didn't feel like I was meeting your friends. It felt like I was being judged." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. "They weren't judging you," he said. They were just getting to know you. No, Alex, I said firmly. They were testing me, and you just sat there like it was completely normal. He leaned back and crossed his arms. I told you they can be intense. That's just how they are. They've always been protective. Protective? I repeated. Of what? You're a grown man. Why do your friends need to sign off on who you date? He shrugged like it was obvious. Because they know me better than anyone. They've seen me get hurt before. I trust their instincts. I looked at him for a long moment. But what about my instincts? My comfort? Did it ever occur to you that I might not be okay with being treated like I'm on trial? He didn't answer right away. I'm not just here to impress your friends, I continued. I'm your girlfriend. I'm supposed to be your equal. But last night, I felt like I was being interviewed for the role of acceptable partner instead of just being myself. He sighed. Look, I get that it was a little much, but you're overthinking it. They actually liked you. You passed. There was again, that word, passed, like I was part of some process. A checklist, a series of qualifications. I folded my arms and asked a question I hadn't dared to say out loud until now. Is this how you've treated all your past relationships? Like they had to get stamped by your little inner circle? He hesitated. Not all of them, but the serious ones, yeah. I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. So this wasn't just a one-time weird dinner. This was how he operated. Like he couldn't trust his own judgment unless his friends validated it. Suddenly, I didn't know where we stood anymore. I had gone into the relationship thinking we were building something real. But it felt more and more like I was being fitted into some version of what he thought his life should look like, approved by his friends, guided by their opinions. And the scariest part? He didn't even see a problem with it. After that conversation with Alex, I felt stuck. I wasn't ready to break up, but something had broken. The trust, maybe, or at least the illusion that we saw relationships the same way. Over the next few days, I tried to move forward like everything was normal, but I couldn't shake the discomfort. The way his friends had treated me lingered in my mind, and worse, the way he'd facilitated it without apology. I felt like a prop in someone else's performance, approved, polished, and presented. Then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I got a message on Instagram from someone I didn't recognize. Her name was Chelsea. She said she used to work with Alex and had dated him for a while last year. I wasn't sure whether to respond at first, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was respectful, not bitter. She just said, I heard from someone we have the same ex. If it's okay with you, can I ask, did he ever take you to meet his coworkers? My stomach dropped. I replied with a short, cautious message. Yes. At Hooters. It was weird. What she sent next made everything click. She told me Alex had done the exact same thing to her. The same coworkers. The same questions. The same vibe like she was being screened for a role. And just like me, she hadn't realized it was happening until it was too late. But the worst part? She said she later found out from one of their mutual friends that Alex and his coworkers kept a running group chat where they rated the women he dated. Actual scores, based on appearance, personality, domestic potential. Chelsea's words, not mine. I wanted to throw my phone. I didn't want to believe it. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The nods, the glances, the way they acted like they were reviewing a resume instead of sharing a meal, and the way Alex used the word passed like it was a badge of honor. It all pointed to the same conclusion. This wasn't just a one-off dinner. It was a pattern, a system. I sat with that information for 2 full days before bringing it up. When I finally did, Alex didn't deny any of it. He just got defensive. He said it was just guy stuff, that the group chat was mostly jokes, that I was overreacting. But I wasn't overreacting. I was realizing the truth. This man didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who fit an image, a person who could be analyzed, approved, and slotted into the life he'd curated with his little committee of friends. And that's when I knew I couldn't do this. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood up, looked him in the eye, and said, "You're not looking for love. You're looking for a product that makes you look good." Then I walked away.